my name is Bill Fathers, and thank you for spending some time with me this afternoon here in beautiful Gainey Ranch in Arizona. As you can tell, I'm a local, born and raised in Arizona. I adopt this accent because apparently it makes it sound more authoritative and genuine, so if it slips, you'll know you can see right through me. But seriously, my name is Bill Fathers. I'm the general manager of VMware's cloud services business, and my background has been in delivering cloud services for the last 7 or 10 years. Previously ran a company called Savis, which some of you may have heard of, and we drove cloud services into clients in the United States, Europe, and Asia. And prior to that, worked in a range of information services companies. Was actually in the British military for 12 years as well. So thank you. What I'd like to do today is talk a bit about the public cloud market and our experiences at VMware of how we're seeing clients adopt public cloud and why, and our own particular point of view on why we think the world really is all about hybrid clouds. Now, I'll come straight out and say I don't particularly like the phrase hybrid cloud, so what we'll try and do is dive straight into what we mean by that and what we're really seeing going on in the marketplace. Now, at VMware, we're quite analytical, so I'll warn you now, the first 7 or 8 minutes of content are facts, because we like a lot of facts as we look at what's going on in the market, and then we'll talk a bit more about the way we see clients embracing public cloud, and then perhaps some time for questions to think a bit about how you're all embracing public cloud at the moment. But first of all, let's get started. Could I ask you to raise your hand if you're an existing VMware client? Fantastic, thank you very much indeed. And also, by the way, because I am British, if I ask for audience participation, it will go no further than raising your hand. There's going to be no coming on stage, none of that nonsense. So could you also raise your hand if you've already started to experiment or use the public cloud as part of your company's IT solution? Great, fantastic. So I think on Jeffrey's slides, we probably have a sort of borderline early adopter pragmatic audience. That's fantastic. So let's just talk a little bit about, I want to set the scene for this incredible transformation that's going on within the IT world. And I'm doing this because I think it's very relevant to the way in which things are panning out in the public cloud market. So we've got this sort of unprecedented level of transition that's going on, and I think IDC phrased it very well. This is a tectonic shift that's going on at the moment as we shift from, obviously having been with mainframe and now client server, we're shifting into this brand new world of third platform applications. And there's a couple of key points to make about that. One is that this transition is going to take 20 or 30 years as enterprises start to embrace the new world of cloud, mobile, big data, and social media. And this transition, and we'll talk about this in a bit of detail about what we mean by the move to this next generation and next wave of applications. It's going to take a long time. So in reality, most companies are going to be straddling what we call Platform 2 and Platform 3 applications for at least 20 or 30 years. Now, here's the more interesting thing. As we transition from Platform 1 to Platform 2, many of the players that started to show a lead in the first 2 or 3 years were in fact the players that didn't survive. In fact, only one player really survived from the transition to Platform 1 to Platform 2, and that, of course, was IBM. But many of the companies that showed early promise, and obviously if you think about the transition from Platform 2 to Platform 3 that's going on, clearly Amazon Web Services is dominating this transition among a few others. But it'd be very interesting to see, it's very rare that in the first 3 or 4 years of a 30-year transition, it's very rare that the winners get defined in the first 3 or 4 years. What normally happens is there are some early movers, which plays to a lot of what Jeffrey was talking about, and now you're going to start to see who are going to be the real winners in this marketplace. Let's get some facts. So we thought we really ought to understand, as our clients are making this transition from Platform 2 to Platform 3, we kind of felt that one thing was pretty sure, we're plumbers, that the infrastructure demands were likely to grow. So we really, really looked into this, and we chose 2020 as the time frame over the next 7 years when we did the research last year. Over the next 6 years, how is the infrastructure that you're all running today likely to expand and grow as we embrace billions of users embracing millions of applications, which is where we're all going to be in 7 or 8 years' time? So the first thing we looked at was just the raw number of IP-connected devices. Highly corroborated analysis. So today we're at about 13 billion IP-connected devices. And as you probably know, there are 7.1 billion people on the planet, so it's just under 2 IP devices per person, which sounds about right. I dread to think how many I've got in my household. The kids seem to buy a new IP device every month, but I think people in this room aren't helping with that average, but it's about 2 per person. So by 2020, we think this is going to grow to a fairly modest 24 billion, so a sort of approximate doubling of the market of the number of IP devices connected onto the network. Sound reasonable so far? This is where it gets a bit more scary. So we've thought about the actual amount of server cores that are deployed today. And obviously, our CEO, Pat, comes from Intel, so this is research we sort of thought about fairly carefully. But today, we think we're sitting at about 80 million cores, and obviously a lot of that is sitting in places like your data centers today, humming away. By 2020, that's set to grow 32 times. So this isn't some abstract figure. You can take this number and think about your own data center footprint. You're likely to see, on average, a 32 times increase in the number of server cores that you're running as you start to embrace third platform applications as part of running your day-to-day business. So that's a big number. So obviously, if you're a virtualization software company, that's a good number. If you're building data centers, it's probably a pretty good number as well. But if you're being held to flat costs year on your IT budget, that's going to be a challenge. We're hoping that Moore's Law is perhaps there's scope for a bit more room for improvement on Moore's Law, potentially. So that's pretty fast growing. So then, obviously, that's quite a high correlation to the number of virtual machines. Today, we're sitting at 48 million virtual machines, which is a number obviously close to VMware's heart. We know that pretty well. But we're fairly sure it'll get to about 240 million virtual machines by 2020. So I talked about the embracing of new third platform applications. And when we talk about third platform applications, we define them as apps that are typically taking advantage of very distributed architectures. They don't care so much about the underlying performance of the infrastructure. They're probably scripted in a new range of languages, SQL Fire, probably using unstructured database technologies like Hadoop, but really are being used in the realm of big data analytics, mobile applications, trying to embrace social and marketing in social environments. But those are sort of applications we're talking about. So as we exited last year, we took a sort of ruler on it and said, well, about 13% of applications that are currently deployed on those 65 million VMs are what we would call next-gen applications. And by 2020, that will have shifted to about 40% of applications that you're running in your enterprise data centers will be what we classify as that. Now, if you sort of think back to the explosive growth we talked about in terms of underlying infrastructure, network, compute, storage, and the rest, you start to get a picture that this new wave of applications requires a whole different scale of infrastructure, a whole different scale, completely radical and different. Just factually on data, so we think today in the world we're sitting at about 4 zettabytes of data. And by 2020, we think that grows to about 40 zettabytes. So where's all this going? So what I'm saying is, as you're starting to make this transition, depending on where you are on Jeffrey's curve, in terms of embracing this new world of next-gen applications to run your enterprise, depending on where you are at some point in time, you're going to see a doubling of the underlying infrastructure capacity on average every 9 months between now and 2020. On average, in this room, depending on where you are on the laggard versus, who are the people at the very end who were never adopting? Laggards and the early adopter. Depending on where you are on that curve, you'll probably see on average a doubling of the underlying capacity you require to support your application portfolio in your data center, a doubling. And of course, that doesn't necessarily equate to a doubling of your physical footprint, because as virtualization starts to take hold, then it's hopefully means you don't have to physically double every piece of infrastructure, but there or thereabouts. And for us, it's a very powerful notion that people sort of talk grandly about, well, of course, public cloud market. What's going on here is just an enormous increase in the capacity required to support the next generation of applications. Colossal, unprecedented. So it's ludicrous to think that any enterprise is going to try and keep that capacity and run it yourself. Of course, you're going to start to embrace public clouds as a way of being able to handle this incredible increase in capacity. And of course, the applications, as we know, are highly variable. And therefore, it's very, very difficult to predict the rate at which you're going to need to add this new capacity. So embracing public cloud is an absolute necessity to survive the tsunami that is coming our way and is already starting to come. And it also feels inevitable, therefore, that you're not going to just use public clouds or just use your own private cloud or your own enterprise data center. For the next 20 or 30 years, you're going to be embracing this world that's a combination of infrastructure and applications you're choosing to run yourself and infrastructure or applications that you choose to buy in the public cloud. Now, we, of course, the marketing team said go hybrid, and we called that hybrid for some reason. But it's just obvious and logical that you're going to be in a world where you have both on-premise private cloud and public cloud environments. So as we think about how people are starting to embrace the public cloud, we sort of took a pretty detailed analysis of the current public cloud market and swathed it up into the three chunks that people often do and said, well, there's software as a service, platform, and infrastructure as a service. And it's early days, as I mentioned. It's perhaps year 3 in what's going to be a 25, 30-year transition. But across each of these three categories, we can see that there have been early winners. People are starting to grab market share. So I'm going to ask for 2 volunteers, please. Could 2 people please raise their hand? Thank you. 1, sir. 2, sir. Thank you. If you could both stand up, please. Thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, these 2 gentlemen represent the current size of the public cloud market around the world. Thank you, sirs. And the rest of you sitting down represent the on-premise market for IT. So those 2 gentlemen, relative to the rest of the size of this audience, represent the entire $31 billion market for public cloud services. The on-premise market today is worth about $3.7 trillion. So less than 1% of IT spend is on public cloud today. So when we talk about this is just getting started, we haven't really even started the transition to third platform applications. We haven't even begun to see the colossal consequences that this is going to have on the underlying infrastructure you have in your data centers. And why am I droning on for 10 or 15? We think that this transition to third platform applications is the thing you have to keep in mind, because that is what is in turn driving the adoption of public cloud, be it at the infrastructure layer, the platform layer, or the software as a service layer. And mentally tracking, as we talk to a lot of our clients, it's very rarely the first thing we start talking about when we walk in and talk about public cloud opportunities. What we don't often do enough is to stop and say, well, can we just talk about how the application portfolio in your business is changing? Well, marketing department's got this thing going on in Facebook. There's a new mobile app that we've got, and the boss is now very keen to make sure that our website's available, and we're starting to use social media. Okay, right, and we've just started to put a new analytic tool on our finance package so that we could make sure that our book-to-bill order cycle is right. And so slowly, there's rarely a client we talk to now, if you think about it, isn't starting to see their application portfolio morph quickly into this world of third platform applications. It's happened very, very quickly. And that, of course, is actually driving what's going on with your public cloud strategy. And you kind of keep both things in your mind as you think about how you're going to embrace public cloud. I think a public cloud strategy that's in isolation of this is probably an obvious point, isn't it? But a public cloud strategy that's being done in isolation to what's going on with your application portfolio is probably something you need to connect the dots on the 2 things. So we're just getting started around public cloud. Great, well done VMware, you've got some great charts and you've done the maths. What does that all mean? So this is what we're thinking. We're thinking a great deal about the extent to which clearly today your data center is running a lot of what we'd call legacy or traditional applications, and the world isn't standing still. You're going to add mail boxes, you're going to add SAP users, you're going to add Oracle accounts, and so all those best-of-breed applications that you've been using for many years, we think likely to grow by about 30%, and we brought the timeframes down a little bit over the next 3 years. So guess what? All the stuff you're still running on platform 2, that's still growing because the business is still growing, and that's care and maintenance and feeding and expansion, and those applications tend to be very infrastructure intensive, so that's all going on as well. But equally, if you look at the sort of sheer number of VMs that are going to be added in the next-gen application world, the growth going on that side is about 300% over the next 3 years. So within this room, you'd probably think that at least over half of the capacity you're adding in the next 2 or 3 years is to support the needs of next-gen applications. And over 80% of those applications get deployed straight into the public cloud. Very, very few people are deploying to next-gen apps in private clouds. They go straight to the public cloud. And that, of course, is what's driving the very, very rapid adoption of public cloud as we go from 1% to who knows over the next 3 or 4 years. So the other point to make here is, your existing applications, it's very much about really driving out and reducing operating costs. On the right-hand side, when you think about the investments you're making in next-generation applications, it's about how can you accommodate the business's needs to launch these new applications that have got a whole different set of requirements. Because it's likely that these applications, agility is very often a sort of big driver for trying to get these applications launched as quickly as you can, and that often is what drives people to put them into public cloud. But hopefully that's a useful way of thinking about the fact that you're going to be spanning these two worlds for the next, who knows, 5 or 10 years. And that, by the way, is the absolute starting point for our strategy in the public cloud, is by saying, that's the reality. You're going to be spanning these two worlds, and therefore having a public cloud strategy that embraces the fact that you need to be able to manage the two worlds simultaneously is what we're really focused on. As you're running your Platform 2 apps in a private cloud, and you then perhaps launch a new mobile application that the sales force is using to do a number of things. So we have some excellent clients working with us who've deployed applications on our public cloud platform. And a good example is a client who launched a new application for the sales force in a motorcycle dealership, shall we say. And they sell a lot of motorcycles every day here in North America. And when someone walks in with a big beard, not saying all motorbike drivers have got big beards, but if someone did walk in with a big beard and wanted to buy a big red motorbike, but that particular branch in Nashville didn't have one, they needed a mobile app where they could say, don't worry, we haven't got one red in stock, but by checking this app on my iPad, I can tell you there's one 15 miles away because we've done a quick check on the inventory and we know that there's no current sales prospects for that store for that bike. Problem solved. So the application itself lives, in theory, would live up in the public cloud. Now, when you put an application up in a public cloud platform from one of the current leading independent public cloud providers, the problem, of course, is that you've gone from being able to buy the best-of-breed infrastructure components that you've probably been buying from Insight for a long time. You've been able to choose candidly from Cisco, from Brocade, from EMC, from NetApp, and the middleware, some great choices from IBM and Microsoft, and you've been hand-picking the components as best-of-breed. Of course, when you go into AWS, the entire stack is entirely proprietary. From data center to database, it is an entirely closed and proprietary environment. So your ability to hand-pick the components at the infrastructure, operating system, middleware, database, that's gone. It's the ultimate lock-in because the entire stack is provided by one player. I'm not seeking to AWS knock. I'm just pointing out that that's the problem with these new standalone heterogeneous clouds, is that it's an entirely different stack. So your application is not going to work when you move it into a different stack. It's been tuned for the best-of-breed technology providers you've been using over the years. The other point is that what you're also seeing is currently a lot of enterprises are just putting their next-gen apps in the public cloud, and the traditional Platform 2 apps are still residing in private cloud, and you don't have the same agility that you've got with the public cloud. So, for example, if you just suddenly wanted to launch in a new market and wanted to add 400 SAP seats, unless you're running that in a public cloud platform and you've managed to find a public cloud that's fine-tuned for SAP, it's the usual 2-3 month project of procurement and cycles. It's not a point and click. Network integration is very difficult from on-premise to a third-party public cloud. It's just the notion of seamlessly extending a network is very complicated. You've got to have a whole different set of management tools. And of course, your IT function in the department probably understands all your existing technologies, but isn't necessarily that attuned to how an Azure or an AWS cloud really works. So that's what we focused on and said, okay, well, we're very lucky to have 400,000 clients, all running VMware technology, over 48 million VMs supporting a whole range of traditional and next-gen applications. How can we build a public cloud that's entirely compatible with the on-premise environment that would give you literally the best of both worlds? And to sort of make sure that isn't just marketing nonsense, we said, well, what do you actually need to be able to do that? Well, you want to make sure that a public cloud that was based on the same hypervisor also allowed you to have common management tools. So the tools you're using to manage your virtualized VMware environment could also manage the environment you have in the public cloud as well. So if you wanted to move workload, you could do it with the same tool. If you wanted to monitor workload, you could do that seamlessly as well. You'd also need a platform that you can deploy both your next generation applications as well as extending the footprint of your current applications. You don't want an environment that's fine-tuned for one or the other. And of course, you don't want to be the pig in the middle if there's a problem with the application running in the public cloud versus the database it's connecting back to on-premise. Wouldn't it be great to just have one person you could call to try and troubleshoot the issues? So that was the vision that really shaped where we wanted to get to. And we actually launched our own, VMware became a service provider how many people are aware that VMware became a service provider last October? Thank you very much. I shall let our marketing department know. Thank you, Francis. Yeah, so VMware became a service provider. We felt so passionately about this vision for realizing the need for a public cloud that was entirely compatible with our on-premise environment. We sort of put our money where our mouth is. Obviously, my background was running service providers, and I came into VMware about a year ago to help launch the service provider business and become a service provider in our own right. So we launched a public cloud. We had a very successful beta last summer, and by September, October of last year, we went live in the United States, started talking to European clients about it in October, November of last year, which many will remember was around the sort of NSA Snowden debacle. And if there's one thing that did for our European client base was make them really convinced that the hybrid strategy is the right one. So we brought forward the launch of our service into the UK this year. And delighted to say that having launched it in September, October of last year, we have been very pleased with the volume of demand we're seeing from a lot of our clients. Adding hundreds and hundreds of clients in the last couple of months of last year, and are really starting to see how clients are using a hybrid cloud technology like this. And I'll just paint the picture of our strategy for the next 5 minutes. So in essence, we believe that to realize this vision of having a hybrid cloud, a cloud that offers you the best of both worlds, of being both something you can run your existing applications on VMware technology, but also then extend up into the public cloud, we think this boils down to these things. It means from an infrastructure perspective, you need to have access to compute, networking, storage resources that are entirely balanced and the same on-prem and off-prem. You need to be absolutely sure that you can extend your compute platforms up into the public cloud. And on top of that, we have a range of both managed and application services. So perhaps some good examples of this. Desktop as a service. So many of our clients already embrace virtual desktop infrastructure and are deploying their own versions of virtual desktop. And what we've done is now offered virtual desktop as a service so that instead of just running it on-premise, you can also choose to run it off-premise as well. And in that particular market, obviously it's very price sensitive. And we offer a desktop $30 a month that you can choose to buy on an hourly basis. And if you need them for an afternoon, a day, a week, a month, then you burst and use them in the capacity over a period of time. And as you don't, you reverse back onto on-premise. So that's an example of a kind of managed service. And also to help people develop new applications on the public cloud, we've taken a number of the sort of application type services, like database as a service, both structured and unstructured databases, so that as you're developing an app up in that environment, you've got access to all of the application services you need to as well. We're seeing platform as a service is something we have available using Pivotal's Cloud Foundry, and we're just starting to see our first wave of clients do their next-gen application on this cloud as well. So that's the vision as to how you build a public cloud that really is entirely linked back to your on-premise environment. So how are we doing it? And I think one thing I just wanted to dig into just for a moment is around this notion of hybrid management. So we're very focused on the sort of life cycle of a workload, and as one of our clients is using one of our automation tools like vCloud Automation Center, how they can use that exact same tool to just move the workload either somewhere on-premise or up into the public cloud. Now, just in terms of some figures here, we have over 380,000 IT administrators today using the VMware management tools, and just this in the spring of this year, in fact, just before then, just in February, March, vCloud hybrid service is going to appear as a resource pool that every one of those end users can now move workload to. So you can choose on the fly to deploy a workload on-premise, or you can choose to deploy that workload up into the vCloud hybrid service. And as that becomes a sort of fully automated and transparent thing that you can do, we're expecting to see the volume of our current 48 million installed base start to really flex and move many millions of those workloads up into the public cloud. So you can see our ambition here is pretty significant. The goal is to be one of the top 3 public cloud providers within 2 years, which obviously gets just pretty big pretty quick. But it's just this inevitable force of nature that so many of our clients are saying, look, we've got this on-premise environment, we now need to expand out into the public cloud. So we're very focused on the detail of how we make the management absolutely seamless, so that when you've moved workload there, you can equally monitor it as well as you could monitor it on-premise. So how are we doing this? We think about our current installed base of clients and how we can build the world's largest hybrid cloud network. And we're doing it in 2 ways. The first is we've become a service provider ourselves, and we're rolling out, as I say, into the United States. We're now in 4 data centers in the US, in Silicon Valley, in Las Vegas, in Dallas, and in Sterling, Virginia. We went live in the UK at the end of last year and are adding a second center there in February. And also this year, you'll see us roll out into France, Germany, Australia, Japan, and China. Not bad for our first 6 months of international expansion. And the way we're doing this is twofold. Firstly, we've become a service provider ourselves, but we're also empowering a number of the world's largest telecom providers and service providers who've been looking to build their own public cloud and have experimented with a number of technologies like OpenStack or other technologies around the world, but have now said, you know what really makes sense is if we effectively license your technology. So we've white labeled our entire platform, and we're rolling out our platform into the hands and data centers of service providers in France, Germany, Japan, Australia, and China. And what that means is we run and operate the platform for those providers, so we're guaranteed that it delivers exactly the same hybrid service experience and the same hybrid services catalog to all of our end clients. So as all of our clients look at their management, look at the tool they're using to manage their existing environment, they can just see a range of options of service providers. They can get access to the same catalog of hybrid services. So that's good. It's a sort of two-pronged technology of not only being a service provider, but if you like, an arms dealer to service providers, is how we're effectively providing coverage to the 96 countries around the world that we have clients today. And the important thing that binds all of this together is that all of these service providers have exactly the same hybrid services catalog, and there's obviously harmonization both technically and commercially, so that our end clients know that whether you're buying this from VMware directly in the United States, obviously Insight, by the way, is one of our probably the most advanced solution provider that really has embraced vCloud hybrid service, and if it's something you're choosing to buy through Insight, or in some of the other countries, you could end up buying it through one of the other service providers that's embraced this technology entirely. So this is very powerful, and some may say VMware did this slightly late, but what we're seeing is as clients go through this huge transition and accommodate this tsunami wave of capacity increase, it's inevitable that you're going to need to embrace public cloud. And we also want to make sure that you can continue to retain absolute control of which resources, which data, and which applications you choose to put on the public cloud versus on-premise, and that you retain that control without having to make compromises on security and performance. Then you can make those decisions on a daily or hourly basis. It's not like you're doing a 3-year outsource contract. This is something that you buy on an hourly basis and can make on-the-fly decisions. So we're fixated on this notion that we've got to make life as easy for you as possible to live in this hybrid world where you've got this combination of on-prem and off-prem. I've said enough. So that's the sort of the changes we're seeing in the marketplace. That's what's driven VMware to become a service provider. Our strategy is to roll this out very aggressively. We've been very pleased to see that since launching the service in September, October, we're now adding hundreds and hundreds of clients who are starting to embrace the product already. And if we just looked at some of the early adopting clients, there's basically 5 ways in which we're seeing people straight away take advantage of this compatibility of it being on-prem, of the on-prem and off-prem environment. obviously, a number of folk are using it for dev and test, which is a workload. It's quite often hard to predict when you're going to need it, and then you certainly know there's going to be a finite shelf life required for that capacity, and therefore you close it down pretty quickly as well. In terms of packaged applications, could be anything from SAP to Oracle to SharePoint, but many of our existing clients look at existing sort of Platform 2 applications. They spend a lot of time optimizing that for the existing VMware virtualization technology, so it's been highly virtualized already. And then you say, well, look, wouldn't it be great to have the utility to be able to have some of this on-premise and some of it off-premise, or maybe a combination of the two. And quite often it's just an inability to predict how much capacity you're going to need next year that drives people to want to put it onto the public cloud. The other way around, so over half of our first 300-400 or so clients are actually software companies who are looking to get access to you. So they see this the other way around, and so they look at vCloud Hybrid Service as a public cloud and know that if they place their technology on our platform, it's something that you can gain access to very easily from within your data centers because of the ability to extend our networking into your environments. Disaster recovery is probably 98% of our clients are now using vCloud Hybrid Service as the default disaster recovery. We've built this into a tool called, I'm sorry to get techie on you for a moment, but we've built this into a tool called Site Recovery Manager. That's this thing within VMware's hypervisor that you basically can say, I want to have this thing backed up. And quite often you do that on-premise. You can just now elect to have that backed up off-premise. So any one of your VMs, you can just select, and it will back up, and it will recover back in VMware's vCloud, in the vCloud Hybrid Service DR service. So that's just one of the sort of no-brainer use cases that most people are using. And in terms of the economics, you pay roughly a 15% reservation fee to have it. And then if you do ever invoke DR, you pay for it by the hour that you've actually used it. So instead of having to sit and have that capacity unused, you pay a very small reservation fee. And then when you use it, you pay for it for the days or hours you use it, and then you recover it back into your on-premise environment. New applications, so next-gen apps, lots and lots of companies now deploying next-gen apps. As we've gone live in the United Kingdom, overwhelming number of really exciting apps that are getting now built on the platform, which are all in this game of, how can I get access to infrastructure quick enough to be able to accommodate the needs of building this new wave of applications. And again, I think Nexon is a client that we're very lucky to have. It's the world's second largest gaming company who started on the platform 2 or 3 months ago. And started by, they're the sort of bigger than Zynga. So they develop online games, and the time frame in which they do their software lifecycle is eye-watering. It often goes from inception to delivery in 7 to 8 days, and these games can often be creating hundreds of millions of revenue within 3 weeks. So it just, the time value of money for those guys in terms of developing an application and bringing it to market, it puts most other industries, to shame. They are all about absolutely optimizing their time to market for any net new application. And they're sort of, I'm sure they're very public about the fact that for every winner, they have ones that in their language, aren't as successful, don't create 100 million within 3 weeks. And so the opportunity cost for them is they quickly back them out, and then they put the next 3 applications or the next 3 games up there. So in their line of business, it's just an incredibly good example. And they started, actually interestingly, they started doing test and dev on the platform, and then were using their own environment on the platform. And then after a month, they flipped it because they realized that their test and dev capacity is entirely predictable relative to their production environment capacity, which they can never guess how much they're going to need because they have no idea how successful a game's going to be. So, so fascinating use cases, it's been a great experience for us to start with this idea of what we thought the market needed, build a platform and a product around that, roll it out, and start to see it embraced by very large percentages of our clients here in the United States and in the United Kingdom. So with that, I'll say thank you very much indeed. That's pretty much the ground I wanted to cover. We've obviously been working very closely with Insight, and Insight was one of the partners that was the very first and actually sort of grabbed it out of us last spring and said, why aren't you doing more in the public cloud service? And obviously it's been great to work with Insight to help educate ourselves and obviously help with our clients who very often will say, this is great, but how do we get started? We've got 15 other IT projects. How can I help get ahead of the game and start to embrace the public cloud as part of what we're doing? So it's been a great experience. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for your time, and I think we have got a little bit of time for questions as well. So if there are any questions, fire away. Oh, actually, what we might just do, actually, we'll have a few questions, but what I also have is some insight from, actually, I might do that first, and I apologize for getting myself slightly out of sequence. So what we actually have is some insight from some of our clients that actually just 2 weeks ago, we went and asked a lot of our clients about how they'd help think about their own public cloud strategy and what it was that made them embrace our cloud in the first instance. So I'll just ask the team to just run that video first, and then we'll come back and see if there's any questions. Thank you.
Columbia Sportswear has really had many conversations with multiple cloud providers and services. What we were really looking for was a strategic partner, somebody that would listen to some of the use cases and the stories and the vision that Columbia had, and would either work with us or be able to provide a solution based on what we were asking for. VMware got it. It was just the right fit and the right solution.
We spent an enormous amount of time researching various options and looking at what provider of cloud-based solutions had the best value in the marketplace. The vCloud hybrid service bubbled up to the top.
The technologies that VMware leveraged to deploy their hybrid cloud matched exactly what Nexon America had already implemented in our private cloud. Our internal resources already had a familiarity with the vCloud Director portal and its usage and many other tools that the VMware hybrid cloud service provides.
So now as we look at our client base, we have an enterprise scaled capability within our own private clouds. So we really turn this into a global enterprise solution that works within a private cloud, within the enterprise VMware hybrid cloud services, and then also provides us under our licensing to burst into other third-party cloud providers. So we're really providing global flexibility as needed on demand.
The life cycle for procuring hardware and even software and getting it configured, it takes a while. Whereas with vCloud Hybrid Service, all you need is a credit card, a Dream, and a web browser to get on and get started with it.
Not only between data center to private cloud to public cloud, but eventually we're looking to go public to public and then back on-prem. We also have about 46 remote branch offices, and today we don't have a business continuity or disaster recovery plan for those offices. Getting onboarded with vCloud Hybrid Service has been exceptional. The customer success team has been there every step of the way.
Today, we're looking at additional bursting or DR capabilities. So with the vCloud Hybrid Service, we want to expand our DR platform and service to our customers. The initial onboarding process was extremely easy. The interface was super slick, and when we did have challenges, the support was awesome.
So this has been a total game changer for our company. And I think it's going to be a total game changer for the entire industry. Then what are you going to do? You're going to go out to your users from an IT perspective and you're going to say, bring it on.
Good, thank you very much. I'm glad I remembered to get some genuine insight from our clients. Sorry. So with that, I'd like to ask if there are any questions from the audience. Sir.
I've got a lot of questions, but I'm not going to take
Come on.
the opportunity from everyone else. Just a key question that I have as far as the prerequisites for leveraging vCloud hybrid services. So I'm assuming that you're targeting those customers who already have a VMware-based cloud service internally deployed in order to migrate to a more of a hybrid service.
Yeah, right now, our service is tuned towards clients who've embraced some part of VMware technology. And basically, if you're running any version of our hypervisor at all, this is compatible.
That is great news. That's
yeah,
great news.
It doesn't matter how much of the rest of the stack you have or haven't taken advantage of. Absolutely any version of the hypervisor or any version of our management tools, if you have any of them like vCenter, would be entirely compatible with this public cloud service offering. And we'll keep that the way. We'll always make sure that it's entirely backward compatible to every one of our versions of technology on-premise.
Well, one last question regarding, there's a lot of other cloud services providers who have traditionally offered VMware-based platforms. How is the vCloud hybrid services differentiating themselves from these other existing VMware-based cloud services? Of course, they have other offerings as well. You talked about OpenStack and stuff like that. So that's another part of the question.
We've been lucky to provide software to a number of service providers around the world. We, in fact, have now 7,000 service providers, are clients of ours, who use our technology to deliver cloud services in the marketplace. What we didn't do is really work out what this hybrid thing truly means. We blanded it around, said a lot of stuff. What it really means, though, is this ability to genuinely integrate at the API user interface level with your on-premise environment. So now we've become a service provider ourselves, and we've really worked out how you integrate the management tools, how you can do things like move all your vApp templates from your existing environment into the public cloud, and have built the VMware hybrid service. We're actually going to make all that technology available to all of our service provider partners as well. So we hope, I mean, back to my analogy of 2 people standing up in an audience of 250 people, this is such an early stage market. It's such a massive market that we're very keen to make sure we empower as many of the service providers as possible to deliver the same hybrid experience. So it's a sort of, it's a double-edged sword to be both a service provider but also providing the technology. But back to the numbers, we just think this is such a colossal, huge market that we don't think we'll bump into each other. So hopefully that's helpful. And so more and more you'll see service providers embrace this hybrid technology stack, and you'll see them start to offer services in the market. Thank you. A question on the front here, I think.
Pretty compelling vision. Thanks for sharing that. 2-part question. One, following on to the discussion that was just had. So you require some level of VMware compatibility on both sides, which makes sense. How sensitive is the solution to hardware compatibility on the public and private side? And then the second question, you alluded several times to we're very early in the journey. How far along do you think VMware is in realizing this vision?
Yeah, I think that the first question is around how sensitive are we to different technologies on-premise versus using this public cloud. The one benefit of being a provider of hypervisors is that you can entirely abstract your way from having any dependency on the storage, the networking, the compute, or even the security technologies that are being used on-premise. So it's entirely insulated from it. So we're able to offer the same experience because we have this layer at the hypervisor that gives us that ability to abstract both. So it makes absolutely no difference. Now what you'll see we're doing in our public cloud is embracing the software-defined data center, as we coin it, as aggressively as possible. So in order to deliver on the agility and the economics that you need to in public cloud, we have our own stack is entirely virtualized, the compute, the network, and the storage layers. So we've completely virtualized the entire stack and obviously added some of our own orchestration and management automation on top of that as well. So there's still parts of our storage that are physical. Some parts of the block storage are still physical, but as we move into file object, then it is almost entirely virtual, and by the end of this year, it'll be entirely virtual as well. And obviously, from getting a bit into the weeds, but from a networking perspective, obviously with Nicira and our own virtualized networking technology, we've become huge customers of that. And so most of our networking is entirely virtualized as well. And the reason we're doing that is not to showcase stuff. It's just that we're driving an economic price point of frankly, 8 cents per gig per month for storage and 3 cents per gig per month at compute. And we expect to be able to show price cuts of, material price cuts every year for the next 20 years. And the only way you get to do that is by continually investing in virtualizing and scaling out the technology. Long answer. In terms of how far are we on the journey? We think about this in terms of today, about sort of 45, 48 million VMs. We think as a company, we'd hope to grow to about 250 million VMs over the next probably 5 years. Probably analysts, that's a rough ballpark in terms of virtual machine growth. And of the growth, we hope that over half of it is on our public cloud. So, we just think that's logical that roughly half is going to go public cloud and half is going to go private cloud. We're thinking it in terms of hundreds of millions of VMs over the next 5 to 10 years, which equates to it becoming the predominant revenue stream for the company. So we think this is the journey now of becoming a services business While we'll continue to be both a software and a services company, this strategic transition to becoming a way of delivering our own software as a service in a way is sort of something we're utterly committed to. So it's just getting started, really. So it's pretty exciting. And as you say, the winners in this market are rarely defined in the first 3 years. It's normally in the middle ground that you start to find out who's going to win. So really interesting. Anyone making a public cloud purchasing decision this quarter? Let's just get a sense for you in the room of how many people are on the verge of thinking, I need to make a public cloud buying decision. Just back to Jeffrey's Moore analogy of, is this early adoption phase or is it, yeah, where are we, do you think? So how many folk do you think are realistically buying public cloud services this quarter? Yeah, pretty good handful. How about this year? How many people can see themselves buying public cloud services this year? Yeah, just about a third to a half of the audience. Yeah, it's probably about, very interesting. One more question.
So, as a consumer of public cloud and private cloud and hybrid, one of our big concerns is working with proprietary technologies and vendor lock-in. There is obviously a trend in the industry now, the open stack, which is pushing for standards. Is VMware going to be the Microsoft of personal computing and kind of try to carve its own space out of this, or will it lean toward the standards that are emerging in the market?
Good question. I think, obviously, for every company, you've kind of got to pick some layers and some partners that you're going to stick with, and other layers where you want to keep absolute optionality and keep your options open. We'd like to think that the hypervisor is a pretty good layer at which you can make a decision, but then that leaves your options open above you and below you. So we abstract ourselves and remain utterly neutral on all the various middleware and software companies, with over 5,700 different software companies today are compatible with VMware. And from an underlying hardware perspective, we're entirely neutral as well. But obviously where we're not neutral is at the hypervisor layer. So we're pretty wedded to that. And in terms of OpenStack, obviously as an API framework or a framework of standards and protocols, we are absolutely committed to embracing the parts of OpenStack that we think will add value to our clients. So a great example, we're obviously very big contributors to the OpenStack framework, obviously in some areas more than others, but in the API, in the networking layer, and obviously at the hypervisor layer, we contribute a great deal to that. Personally, as someone building a public cloud in this marketplace this year, I look carefully at the OpenStack APIs. And when I was choosing which API to expose to clients, I'd wanted to use OpenStack, but it's just too early. There's just not enough richness in it that you could realistically do useful things. I mean, you couldn't, for example, use the OpenStack API today to provision a new workload and be given advance notice of how much that's going to cost. So there's no commercial protocol to say how much would it cost if I do provision that and then I'd like to deprovision it. It's rudimentary. But we will embrace OpenStack API as soon as it becomes available, or rather as soon as it matures. And equally, as I look at my stack, the secret sauce isn't tied up in that area. It's around the compatibility at the hypervisor. So, we absolutely don't seek to achieve lock-in. We'll remain as application and hardware neutral as we always have been. We're obviously pretty committed at the hypervisor layer. And as OpenStack evolves, and I think we're about number 4 or 5 on the pecking order globally of contributors to the OpenStack framework, we'll embrace it when it's mature and ready. Can I just cheekily do another quick audience survey? Who here is experimenting with OpenStack in any shape or form in your current environments? Yeah, interesting. Yeah, good. A handful, yeah. And again, as we see that, it's really start to embrace, and we'll probably start to look more aggressively at the OpenStack API. Good. Well, thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. I hope you have a good rest of the session, and thanks again for the opportunity.